Welcome to another Walter Football video. I'm Charlie Campbell, Senior Draft Analyst. Before we get rolling here, I suggest you click into the settings, speed it up to 1.25 or 1.5. Alright, I wanted to get into some more draft theory videos. If you check in the links below, there's some that I've done in the past and gotten a lot of good feedback on in terms of some of the topics, kind of digging into draft philosophy and theory in terms of how successful teams draft and looking at trends and things like that. So there's videos on like drafting from positions of strength, weak drafts, strong drafts, kind of getting into the myth as far as do teams really do well in a weak year? Can they still do well in a weak year? That was one video. So you can check all that below. Lots of good stuff in there in my opinion. But anyways, this draft theory video I've been meaning to do for quite some time. So it's really about the success rate of premium positions. Now for the NFL, obviously quarterback is at the very top. Teams, that's the highest priority for every team in the NFL in terms of needs and wants, in terms of you always want to have that franchise quarterback that you believe can take you to a Super Bowl. So that's paramount of importance at the top of the mountain. After that, teams have 4 premium positions. So you have edge rusher, offensive tackle, wide receiver, and cornerback. So those are the 4 premium positions that teams emphasize in roster building and kind of allocation of resources. Some teams will vary on that. Say, for example, in years with Sean Payton and the Saints, they really placed a lot of emphasis on interior offensive linemen being important for their roster and their system and their scheme. The Ravens have always put a big priority on safeties. The Patriots have always put priority, more priority than other teams on, say, linebacker. So it varies somewhat, but overall in the scouting community, when a scout will refer to me, and he plays a premium position, so that means he's going to get pushed up the draft because teams are going to value that and draft for it more. So last year, before the 2022 draft, I was talking with a good friend of mine who's high up at a team, and we were talking about how their team was potentially in the market for edge rush, for wide receiver. They had other needs as well. And so I was kind of thinking about it in our discussions, and I was kind of just started brainstorming. Well, I think, that in some ways the top wide receivers, wide receivers going in the top half of the first round seem to be a bit safer than some of the edge rushers. And that was just kind of a thought that popped in my head. And I was like, well, let's look into that. Let's dig into that. So I started kind of an informal research on this. And I went back to 2013 because it doesn't really make sense to go back further than that. The league is constantly evolving the kinds of systems that teams are using and utilizing, so they look for different kinds of players. Obviously, if you go back further, the NFL emphasized the ground game more, then it's become more a passing-driven league. So anyways, I just went back 2013, past 10 drafts. So let's look at the success rate of the premium positions. And this can be helpful for teams to say they have a need that team, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback, offensive tackle. If you have needs at 2 or 3 of those positions, it might make sense to draft the one that has a higher success rate, just so you're building up the talent on your roster, getting picks right, getting return on your investment for a first-round pick. All right, so let's do wide receivers first. Over the past, since 2013, 57% turned out to be good picks, 43% turned out to be bad. And so there are some that I'm not including in that number. Guys like, say, Jerry Jeudy, for example, or Kadarius Toney. It's too early to render judgment. Really, you want 3 seasons in my opinion, at least 3 seasons for a player to make any kind of judgment as to whether they're going to stick or be a good player in the NFL. But that was interesting. 57% were good. You had guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, more guys, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle. Even though they're not 3 years in, that's clear they're good. They're good players. And then you had like some bad picks, for example, where like Tavon Austin with the Rams, Corey Coleman with the Browns, Laquan Treadwell, Josh Doxson. I mean, those kind of players are bust. So that, again, 57% were good for wide receiver, 43% were bad. Offensive tackle was interesting. 62% were good or managed to stick on the roster as a solid pro. 38% were busts or disappointing. So in the bust column, you had guys like Luke Jokel, Isaiah Wilson, Andre Dillard, Germain Ifedi. In the good column, you had guys like Eric Fisher, Lane Johnson, Jake Matthews, Taylor Lewan, Taylor Decker, Laramie Tunsil, Jack Conklin, Ronnie Stanley. There are some really good ones and some solid pros. And this doesn't include, say, a player like Penny Sewell, who would obviously is a good player already, Pro Bowl caliber player, so he would bump that up. But that was really interesting to me. 62% good, managed to stick on the roster. 38% were busts or disappointing. Okay, now let's get to the defensive side. This was interesting. Edge rusher. 44% were good, 56% were busts or disappointing. So you could say a disappointing pick was Dante Fowler, for example, where he didn't work out for the Jaguars. They took him 3rd overall, but he's had some nice seasons for other teams. So that's kind of a player that would fall into that category. But you've had a lot of disappointing players, guys like Taco Charlton, Deion Jordan, Barkevius Mingo, Shane Ray, Leonard Floyd, another one that he's disappointing for the Bears and what they invested in him, but he's turned into a good pro with the Rams. But that's still a disappointing pick in a return on investment for a high first rounder for the Bears franchise. So there's that. Edge rusher, you got some good players in there. Clowney, Khalil Mack, the Bosas, Brian Burns, DeForest Buckner. He's kind of an interior edge guy as well. But anyways, some good players there. But 44% were good, 56% busts or disappointing. Cornerback, we had more interesting numbers. 44% good, 55% bad or disappointing. So with the good players there, you had guys like Jalen Ramsey, Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus Peters, Desmond Trufant, Patrick Surtain, Tre'Davious White, more guy, Denzel Ward. Bad, C.J. Henderson, disappointing pick for the Jaguars. You had players like DeAndre Baker, Garyon Conley, Eli Apple, there's Vernon Hargraves, Justin Gilbert, D. Milner. 44% good, 55% bad. So, interestingly, the offensive players have been safer, is one thing to consider. And the other thing that I kind of looked at with a lot of these guys that were disappointing, the lists are too big to name everyone, but a lot of them, it felt like character. It came down to character. That was a huge issue for a lot of these guys, disappointing players. They had some of them that came up consistently in terms of there was a character risk with the player going into the league, and it turned into being a big problem for him as a pro. So that's this week's draft theory. I'll try and come out with these a bit more. I have a few other topics I want to get into, but that's just something I looked at with for teams over last year. Just I thought some interesting info I'd pass along to you guys. So please like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Help us with the channel. I'll be back with you guys soon. You take care. Happy New Year. Love to all of you.